sorry now that I'm a little late. I apologize that you had to wait. It totally slipped my mind. I lost all my sense of time. So buy me that drink and just let me think, and I'll tell you the reasons why. My alibi.
Hello and welcome to Alibi the Podcast, an initiative started by Gagasan Mahasiswa Undang-Undang Sabah, or GUNS for short. I am your host for this session, Ephraim Logijin. On today's episode of Alibi the Podcast, we will be discussing the abolition of mandatory death penalty in Malaysia. Before we begin our session, let's get to know our guest on the podcast today. We are very lucky to be joined by a very special guest on today's episode. It is Datuk Seri Richard Malanjum. Richard Malanjum obtained his LLB from the University of London and later was admitted to the English Bar of the Honourable Society of Gray's Inn. Upon his return to Malaysia, he continued his service as a Deputy Public Prosecutor and Senior Legal Counsel at the Sabah State Attorney General's Chamber. He was then appointed as the Chief Judge of Sabah and Sarawak and was later sworn as the 9th Chief Justice of Malaysia. Welcome to the podcast, Tun. We are truly privileged to have your insights with us today. Before we delve into our main discussion of today's podcast, could you share some insights regarding your background and journey in becoming a Chief Justice of Malaysia?
It's a long journey. You're looking at a range of years because I finished when I think most of you are not around yet. I finished my studies in 1975 or 76. And from there onward, I have been in the legal world. And of course, I joined the judiciary after a DPP and practice. I joined the judiciary in end of 1991, first month, I think February of 92. And from there onward, I've been a judicial commissioner, judge, and then appellate judge. And until April of 2019 that I left the service. So that's the journey that I took. And along the journey, it has been up and down. It's ups and downs, actually. And for those law students and those law graduating students, you have to be prepared for a hard life. It's not a life of bed of roses, you know. They are in between, sometimes potholes here and there. You cannot avoid the potholes. And then at times, frustrations coming in. At times, you even feel of being burnt out. There are also times when you burn out and you just get tired with the profession. But the trick is be patient and never give up. As well as you have to work very hard. You have to keep up with the law, read and read and read. Non-stop, and you must try yourself to be as competitive, as competitive as possible. Right. That's my short advice. If you want to succeed in the legal profession, there is no shortcut. Those guys that tells you there's a shortcut, I think they are either fraud or just pulling a fast one. So it has to be hard work, persistence, consistency. And as well as honesty, dedication, and the most important thing is humility. Be humble. If you want to be a successful lawyer, you must be prepared to be humble and not to show off that I'm a lawyer. I can throw my weight around. I can bully people. No. Humility is the word. Honesty and humility, to me, you may be the smartest lawyer in town. If you don't have the honesty, you don't have the integrity, you don't have the humility, you are not good. Yeah. So those are the key words that I would share with you all. Looking back in retrospect, that must be, that's very important. Okay.
Thank you so much for the valuable insight. I believe in order to become a lawyer, we have to be especially humble and honest in whatever we are doing. And for us law students who are working or striving to become a lawyer in the future, we have to put that in mind lah. And you have to find the joy in doing the work that you are doing right now. So thank you so much. Now that we've had the pleasure of getting acquainted with our esteemed speaker, let's delve into the heart of today's discussion. To kick things off, let's explore the intricate concept of the death penalty. Tuan, would you be so kind as to enlighten us on what the death penalty actually means and what its role is as a method of punishment?
Well, death penalty has been with us even during it was brought along by the colonial British, actually. It has been there it was introduced when they introduced the penal code and all that.
Mm.
So it has been in our jurisprudence, in our judicial system all these years. And as you know, capital offences attract death penalty. And on top of that, there are also other offences that may not seem to be capital offences, yet still attract death penalty. One of those days were drug trafficking and kidnapping and so forth. So, because we always associate with death penalty with killing, murder. That's normally being understood generally, but of course, under the law, murder is only one of those offences that attracts death penalty. So, therefore, for Malaysia, all this while there's been death penalty for capital offences, and that has always been queried by international bodies. Like, for instance, there is the review by the human rights, and then we are always being measured by under Convention of Civil and political rights, ICC. PR, I think, is the convention, and and of course under the under I think it's even under the Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that also has been, I think, spelled out there that death penalty should be abolished and so forth. But all this while, I think there have been no appetite or no political will to change the law until in 2018, when there was therefore a move to have a relook on the death penalty. Therefore, there was a committee set up to look at the feasibility of removing death penalty. After that, a report was prepared, submitted to the government, and finally, there was this act that came out, I think, subsequently. In 2019, I think is the act, if I remember correctly, you can check on it, whereby the death penalty was not to use the word abolish in Malaysia. I think it's a misnomer. It could be misleading. Malaysia has not abolished death penalty in total, It has not abolished death penalty entirely. What happened was that there are about 11 criminal offences that used to be, I think, with the death penalty, and later on that was not mandatory. Last time they used to be mandatory death penalty. That's the word. So we have no longer actually what we call a mandatory death penalty. The matter is now left to the court to decide whether to impose death penalty or not. Unlike last time, the court has no choice. For instance, drugs and so forth, and the court has no choice but to sentence a person to death. So with the new law, that has been changed. So it's a mandatory death penalty that has been more or less changed. Is now being left to the judge to decide. He has a discretion. So that's how it is. So when you say abolishment of death penalty in Malaysia, it can be misleading.
Right.
But the abolition of the mandatory death penalty, more like it that is more like it, So that's the position. That I have not really been in touch of all the development, but I had a quick look at the act, and I think that's how it is. That mandatory has been abolished, isn't it?
Yes,
and
correct.
But death penalty is still there. That in the event, especially if there's a very cruel murder, for instance, it's a very cruel murder, And that is where maybe a death penalty is being imposed
I see.
by the court, but it's up to the court.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the position of the
Okay.
Malaysian on death penalty.
Um, Actually, I
Mhm.
would like to know what your opinion is on it after because previously we have the mandatory death penalty, and now
Mhm.
I think in July 2023 is
Mhm.
when the death penalty was abolished, but
Mhm.
it still exists in
Mhm.
the law, but it's just that
Mhm.
it's now at the discretion of the judge. So
Correct.
from here, I actually want to know your opinion. What's your opinion on this? That it is now under the judge discretion, the death penalty.
Well, if you ask me,
Mm,
being on the bench before,
mm,
I think it's wise to do that because if you if you tie the hand of judges, yeah, and you are no longer leaving the judge to be a judge,
mm,
he is not, he is literally a rubber stamp, is he not? If it's
yes.
mandatory, he's literally a rubber stamp.
Mm,
Then you don't want the court to be a rubber stamp, right?
yes.
Because, for instance, there may be a lot of extenuating circumstances that justified not to impose that penalty. Yet, because of the law, the judge may have no choice but to impose, is it not? Even though how reluctant he might be. So that is where the word mandatory becomes very difficult for the court. So, therefore, if you ask me of my view, I think that is a step in the right direction. You remove the mandatory aspect of punishment
Mm,
and leave it to the court. Of
mm,
course, the next question might be, why not abolish entirely that penalty? That is a policy matter which I think it would be good to have actually a all-round study about it again,
mm,
from the public view and all that, because there's no point to simply force a
mm,
law to the society if it is not acceptable. Okay, that's one of the basic element of law. It must be acceptable by the public,
correct.
yeah, as much as possible. That's to me, that is one of the basic principle of the rule of law. We will see that the next question will be again, of course, it will be hypothetical if we were to answer that. Yeah, the removal of the death penalty, you ask me, is actually, I think that is in the step in the right direction.
Mm.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that insight. We now understand the concept of death penalty.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for the
Mhm.
explanation again. I would like to ask a question regarding your experience as a Chief Justice. Firstly, I would like to apologize if I ask this question because this question is
Mhm.
quite sensitive. And do feel free to refrain from
Mhm.
answering if you
Mhm.
prefer. So, if
Mhm.
I may respectfully inquire, have you
Mhm.
ever
Mhm.
presided over a case resulting in the imposition of the death penalty? If so, how did you navigate the emotional aspect of such a weighty decision?
Well, if a person take up the post as a judge, right, he must be prepared to do the work of a
Yes,
judge,
correct.
right?
Mm,
Don't take up the post if you are not ready to carry the job or the task
mm,
of a judge, right? So
yes.
that's very important. That's
Mm,
the first thing. Two, when you're sitting there, then you are just implementing the law, is
mm,
it not? Right?
yes.
So there should be no emotional or personal
Mm,
view should not come in. You
mm,
should be impartial. You should be independent
mm,
and so forth. You should only act based on the evidence. These are
mm,
the needs these are the things that the judge should be very much apprised to, very much be aware of. Independent, impartial, and no personal feeling to be put
mm,
into it. That's also is very important. Otherwise, it'd be wrong, If you bring in your prejudices, your personal prejudices in the case, you are no longer impartial. You are no longer independent in the way. Okay? So, and therefore, as a judge, and you hear capital offense, which may attract death penalty, capital punishment, then you hate as a judge. And at the end of the day, after hearing the evidence and giving a good uh, thought about it and good reason, and you come to your judgment, and you must therefore then pass the sentence according to law, is it not? There's no two way about it. And neither can you say that, oh, it's against my conscience, I cannot put that thing. If you have all that attributes, don't be a judge. Just stay at home and go and become a priest or become something else, become a monk. Yeah, is it not? So
Yes,
these
true.
are things. Yeah. So you want same thing with the lawyer. The same thing with a lawyer.
Okay.
If a lawyer is doing a case, say it's a defense counsel, and it's involved, say, capital punishment, capital offense, and of course it will end up with having a capital punishment. A lawyer must not be emotionally involved in the case. That is wrong. You must do that case as much as independent mind as possible and as objectively as possible.
Right.
It is objectivity is the key word. You cannot put in your own feeling, your own belief, and so forth. Cannot. Should not do that. And it should never be done that. How do you therefore detach yourself from all that? That is important because first it involves a lot of maturity. Be conscious about the fact that look, this is the law. I'm here to do my work. I'm here to follow the law, and therefore I act accordingly. What I believe is irrelevant. What I feel is irrelevant. Okay. What I dislike is irrelevant. All that. Yeah. So there's no saying as I. You know, when you're dealing with the case, I, myself, and all that. Nah. Yeah. Okay. So that's how it is. So, of course, with all that in mind, if you then sit as a judge and be serious about doing the work of a judge, then you don't even think about it. Not that you become mechanical, not that, but you know well that you are following the law and you are just implementing what is in the law. Okay, so that's how it is. Whether you feel having a sleepless night after that, doing all that, I think that should not come into the equation at all. That should not come into the question. And I think no judge will come and tell you to say that after I've sentenced a person to death, I cannot sleep and all that. No judge worth his salt will ever tell you that.
True.
If a judge tells you that, and he shouldn't be a judge in the first place.
I think just now you mentioned that judges should not be in their right mind, telling people that they aren't able to sleep after implementing or imposing the punishment itself, right? I would like to ask, based on my research regarding the death penalty, I read several articles about it. I learned that it is actually for the purpose of deterrence, which is causing fear to the society from doing or refraining from doing an act that is punishable by this death penalty. However, the crimes that is under the death penalty is still being done in today's society. So what is the actual purpose of the mandatory death penalty if the aim is for the sentence of deterrence, but it is still not working in modern day society?
Well, I guess that's one of the reasons why Malaysia had a relook at the law.
Yes.
Because it must have been thought that, well, it doesn't deter people. Like, for instance, drug trafficking. Has the drug trafficking gone down because of the deterrent center? Do people really actually stop committing offenses just because there is that death penalty hanging over their head? There is no empirical study on it in a way, you know. I think if ever there are studies, it is the other way around to say that death penalty itself is not a sufficient deterrent to prevent the commission of grievous offenses or serious offenses or capital offenses. So there is therefore this debate of whether it is deterrent or not. And there are actually almost a lot of countries nowadays around the world where they've actually abolished death penalty. I think only a handful, I think, is now having a death penalty, like Singapore, uh, and the other one, I think, even Korea, they have that, but they never use it actually, even though it's there. But they don't. The only one that they actually quite frequent in using it at the moment now, I think, are the Middle Eastern country, and in the Middle East, where they chop the head if they come, they do something, they impose a death penalty. Even the U.S., some state in U.S. still impose death penalty by injection and all that. China, I think, also is still doing it, and a few other countries, but not most of the Western countries. I think they have more or less abolished, except for U.S. certain states in U.S. So whether it is deterrent or not, you can then judge, looking at the Western world, are there suddenly high increase in murder or whatever in the Western world after they abolish the death penalty, death penalty? No one can say actually for as a clear indications, it is not a question of black and white, I think. So if you ask me whether it is therefore a deterrent, there is no direct answer to that.
You see.
Some countries may say, like one professor, I think, Professor Roger Hood, I think, of the Oxford University, if you read his book, he say that there's never been a deterrent. Roger Hood, I think, that's the professor's name, who wrote the book on death penalty and so forth. So, and they have argued that it's never a deterrent. So, you can read yourself, for example, that murder is still committed almost every day, and drug trafficking is also still there. Yeah, in fact, maybe even getting worse to an extent. So these are things that it is a very debatable subject in a way, that whether it's deterrent or not. But if you ask me, in my personal view, is that I doubt whether it's a deterrent. It may, to a certain extent, but it will never curb the commission of capital punishment, capital offenses. Yeah. Okay.
Do you think in the near future, the abolishment of mandatory death penalty, or even, the abolishment of death penalty is possible in Malaysia?
That's what I'm saying. It depends very much on the society. It depends very much on the society, because you must remember that our society has been imbued with this kind of thinking that, well, if you commit murder, it's eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth kind of mindset, So I think you need to really go back to the community, to the people, and to say, well, which do you want? Should we abolish? They should study that and research properly. I don't think it should be done by the stroke of a pen. I think it'd be wrong. Okay? So, because assuming you abolish it and society is not happy with it, the community is not happy, then that only tells you that the law is not acceptable by the majority of by the people of the country. So, but if you seek for their views and or the opinion, and then do a proper research on it, then you come to then you can come to a finding whether to abolish it entirely or not. So that's how it is. You must keep in mind, you must bear in mind as well that Malaysia is a diverse society, right? Diverse communities, different belief, even within the religious belief differs. Yeah, some religious belief says that death penalty should be kept. Some says no, 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 no. No one has a right to take another person's life except God and all that. Some says that, well, if you don't carry it out, you have no feeling for the victims,
mm,
isn't it? That's
yeah,
another thing of doing it. You 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 literally take away somebody's life, for instance,
mm,
in murder, and then somebody had to spend years in jail, and after what, 10 years, 20 years, he is allowed to continue to live.
mm,
So you are not sensitive to the feeling of the victims or the family of the victims,
mm,
so forth. So these are argument, I think, that is good. If I were you all, that's your society, your GAN, your
mm,
group, it would be a good idea to have maybe a debate.
yeah,
It can be even a virtual debate, one group and the other group, and you can have 2 or 3% listening as a judge and hear the argument. And maybe it's one very good project because it's a very debatable
mm.
topic, right?
So, in like making a decision, like such a weighty decision,
Mm.
what are the things that you consider one of the factors into implementing that penalty?
Well, depending on the facts and the
Basically.
circumstances and evidence, that's
Mm,
basically.
that's
Uh, no judge will ever should ever make his finding or judgment without evidence. Everything must be based on evidence.
mm,
That's the function of the judge. And having an evidence and to consider it, weigh it, the judge have to weigh the evidence before coming to a judgment. He can't simply do throw a coin and make head or tail type of thing. No, no, no.
mm.
There's no guessing game.
Correct, correct. So basically, like I mentioned just now, I understand actually the part where the abolishment of death penalty, it actually depends on how the society views it also.
Yeah.
But how do we actually you know how the death penalty is still in our law and how it is still based on the judge's discretion, meaning that it's not totally abolished yet. It's just that the
Mhm,
word mandatory is already abolished,
mhm.
leaving it to the judge's discretion. How do we inform the society that that is how the law is?
It's up to the authorities to disseminate that kind of information. Yeah,
Mm,
whether they want to tell it, this is the law and so forth. It's up to the relevant agencies to disseminate that kind of information, or the
mm,
civil society. The civil
mm,
society also can speak about it, can
mm,
debate about over it, and so forth. So
mm.
yeah, that's how it should be.
So basically, in order for the society to further understand, is that
Mhm,
us as being a good Malaysian citizen also have
mhm.
to
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
and have that courtesy to know about our law and to
Mhm,
further understand how it works and why it works.
mhm.
So I
Yeah,
think, yeah.
having for example, that your organization or your
Mm,
society, they have a role to play.
mm,
Can conduct what they call information clinic,
mm,
information legal clinic. That would be a good,
mm,
program during school holidays where you inform the public, the community, go to the villages, speak about the law. That'd be one
mm,
of the good idea. Or go to over the radio or social media. Why not?
mm. So doing something like this is also like a clear example of how we can
Mm.
sort of
Yeah,
spread
yeah.
that awareness, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the Malaysian judiciary, they have
Mm.
this from program from court to classroom, C to
Oh,
C. Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah. In fact, uh, I, I I I I don't like to say the word I started it, but yeah, it began during my time,
Mm,
and I thought that's a good program that from court to classroom. In other words, the judges sometimes go to the school and or the magistrate and legal officers to speak about the law.
mm,
And the student from I think it's from Form 3 upward. It could be
mm,
from Form 1 or Form 3 upward. Then they can visit the courts and understand the legal system. So that's why it's called a C2C program. In Sabah also they do have that kind of the
okay.
courts there. I think they
Mm,
also have that program. You can find more about that in the website of the judiciary.
mm,
C2C, they call it court to classroom program.
yeah.
They have that.
I see. Okay. So for my last question,
Mm.
what is your final words on this topic, and what is like an advice that you can give to us for the future,
Mhm.
for our future generations?
Well, on this topic, I think not much can be said about it because it's all
Mm,
spelled out in the act, is it not? So,
yes.
it's just a matter now of getting the content of that act, to be
Mm,
understood in a
mm,
simplified fashion.
yes.
So I think that's important to simplify it so that members of the public can understand it,
Mm,
in the way that it should be understood. All right.
yes.
And as for advice for the future lawyers and all that, uh, I only have to say this. First of all, I think is that since your society is very active,
Mm.
uh, and you're from Sabah, most of it from Sabah, or it is all over the world.
So this organization, Gagasan Mahasiswa Undang-Undang Sabah, is
Mhm.
basically Sabahan law student all over the world in this one organization.
So
So
it's actually a Sabah-centric kind of
yes,
society. Okay.
correct.
If
Mm,
it is Sabah-centric society in a way, then
mm,
you should really think about helping the needy,
mm,
Like, for instance, in the days that when I was still in the court, and even until it's still ongoing, I think the introduction of the mobile court, a mobile
mm,
clinic, mobile legal clinic, and all this, I think it's a good idea that uh, law students should get involved in it
mm,
because you'd be surprised how much of the need, how much kind of legal help is needed by the rural folks, especially those in the villages. Huh?
mm,
Uh, for instance, even doing a simple statutory declaration, or
mm,
even filling a simple form of to apply something,
mm,
they need help to get all that, and they or to understand that. And to them, the court is some place that high up there, and they're very scared of approaching. So these are things that is good to make them understand how the legal system work, and that
mm,
the legal system is not there as a policeman, but
mm,
the legal system is there to help them.
mm,
That is the misconception most of the time. People say, oh, the court is against me. It's a place where it's only meant for the bad people, only
mm,
meant for offenders. That's not true,
correct,
right? The court is a place where you're supposed to get justice and
correct.
fairness. It's
Mm,
a place where the voiceless can be heard. Okay. The other thing, I don't know I don't know how much is recorded just now, but I was just saying that
mm,
your society being as well, look at the point about on the native customary land,
mm,
NCR, native customary land rights. I think it's a very important topic.
mm,
And look at all those judgment of the courts,
mm,
whether fair to the community or not, in a way. Yeah.
mm,
And how would you interpret those judgments, and how can you then, what they call it, mitigate maybe the impact
mm.
of those judgments,
I
right?
see.
These are very important. So maybe your members, even though they're studying in England or elsewhere,
Mm,
should form what I call brainstorming about the issue of NCR. I think it's
mm,
important,
I
yeah,
see.
and come up with a kind of understanding
Mm,
on how it is. I'm sure there must be some of your members who are already in the final year may have already
mm,
done the land law,
mm,
so or land law, so they can understand. So they should be reading all the judgment of the
mm.
Malaysian courts
I
and
see.
analyze them and see where are the what they call it, the loopholes of the
Mm,
judgment through which then justice can be reinstated to those who have been deprived of their land and so forth. Okay,
mm,
so those are important factors to think about if
mm,
I were you all,
mm,
because you can't. No lawyer should simply swallow a judgment,
mm,
uh, you know, as if wholly, like just swallow it
Mm.
without even looking at it and seeing things that were there, through the prism of a critical understanding. Yeah? You can't simply just say the judge said it must be true and therefore it must be right. You, as a lawyer, we don't do that. You respect the judgment, yes, no doubt, but you also look at where you can actually look at the weaknesses of the judgment, where therefore you can then distinguish it so that to attain justice. That's very, very important. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Any more?
That's
all.
Yeah, I think we have reached the end of our session. So again, special thanks to Datuk Sri Malanjum for being able to share his knowledge regarding the abolition of mandatory death penalty in Malaysia. It has really been an enriching and fruitful discussion that I believe we can all take something away from. And we hope you well, and we look forward to working with you again in the future. To all listeners, thank you for listening to Alibi the podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, and if you want to find more podcasts like this, you can subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor to stay updated on all our latest releases. We hope you can join us for our next episode as well. Thanks again and take care.
Sorry now that I'm a little late. I apologize that you had to wait. It totally slipped my mind. I lost all my sense of time. So buy me that drink and just let me think, and I'll tell you the reasons why.